today we're going to be interviewing two brothers that are wonderful men of God, and some interesting perspectives today, some things that are related to what we've been through on two different fronts. The front of the coronavirus itself and its relationship to ministry that is in that parachurch world, that private nonprofit world of which there are many. And then also we're going to look at some of what has happened as a result of the recent riots and the things pertaining to the very sad death of George Floyd. And we're going to be looking at some things related to that in our first interview. And so anyway, with no further ado, I'd like to ask you to give a warm welcome to Brother Cain Kellerman. Brother Cain Kellerman, who's going to come and talk to us about some things that he is very, very familiar with pertaining to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and some of the issues of what's going up there, having lived in there in the past. So, Cain, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, too.
Welcome, welcome.
I'm a little wider than that.
Man, I'm so glad you're with us.
Yes.
So we also have today, some pictures to show you, but I'd like to just go ahead and start by just letting Cain kind of fill you in, I guess from a couple of biographical viewpoints. Cain, how long did you live there in Minnesota?
Well, I grew up in South Minneapolis, so I lived there till I was 13. Then my parents moved out of there more to central Minnesota. Then after I married my wife, we moved back to the same neighborhood, and we had bought a house there. Okay. And we lived there until about 6 months after Malachi was born. Then we moved out of there.
And it was during those years in Minnesota, not in Florida, but back in those years when you came to know the Lord after a really rough young life.
Well, I started using drugs really early on. I started using heroin when I was 10 years old and kind of went down a road that wasn't great. In that, I was arrested quite a few times as a kid, and my first arrest came 2 weeks after my 18th birthday as an adult. I was in a different town. I went to many different treatments. And until I found out who Jesus was, when I finally went to a normal church service that I was begged to go to. And I went to that, and I don't remember the service at all. The end of it, though, somebody went to try to pray for me, I guess. Mm-hmm. Is this better? I can't hear it. Oh, there. There, is that better? Yeah. All right. So at the end of that church service, somebody had put their hand on my shoulder to pray for me, I guess. That's what I'm taking as now. And at that time in my life, nobody would touch me, or nobody could touch me. I didn't allow it. And so I hurt him, and that put me in the hole in jail in administrative segregation. I don't know here. But in that time, in that cell, is when I gave my life to the Lord after somebody had given me a prison Bible. I started reading the book of John. I gave my life to the Lord there, and shortly after that, I asked him to take away the drugs, the usage of it all, the want, all that. And so because of that, I've been sober now for over 24 years.
Oh, yeah.
Only through him.
Well, talk to us a little bit about, especially about your knowledge of Minneapolis and some of the things that you saw as far as that urban environment and things that were characteristic of it. What were some things that you saw?
Well, where I grew up was in South Minneapolis, and Minneapolis is kind of broken up into blocks: east side, west side, north side, and south was an okay area. It wasn't that bad. I grew up on 38th Street and 39th Avenue, and in that area, if you went 8 blocks, it would be east. You got to 30th, which was called Lake Street, and the closer you got to Lake Street, the worse it got. So there was a lot of gang activity, a ton of gang activity. When I was 12, a friend of mine died, getting shot to death. I held him while he took his last breath. And so that was the kind of area. It was slowly getting worse as I was growing up. The police were not the nicest, and it was that third precinct that was burnt down was the group that was around where I was living. They were known to be brutal, and they would routinely hit people and beat them before they brought them to jail. So there was a lot of animosity, even when I was growing up, towards the police in that area. And I still get pulled over. I got pulled over when I was living there. When Sherry and I bought our house, I'd get pulled over randomly, thinking I was somebody who robbed a bank. And that was when I was trying to get my dad a Father's Day card. I come out of the store with a Father's Day card, and I get slammed in the hood of a cop car and get cuffed. That happened, unfortunately, quite a bit. And as when I moved down here, it still happens. I still get pulled over quite a bit, and that's part of the reason why I did this trip.
One of the things that's important that, we kind of, for the purpose of laying groundwork, I think, at this juncture, just to freeze frame one thing, so that everybody knows that you and I colluded. Our purpose is not to demonstrate any try to influence a particular viewpoint of what we're talking about, but just to state experiences and facts for the purpose of saying there are things going on in our world that a lot of us have not been conscious of.
Yes.
And we need people to talk and say, hey, just as an awareness,
Yes,
and
be open about it.
And it has happened to you not only in Minneapolis, but it happened to you in Florida.
Yes.
And so, while you have engaged in absolutely nothing that was lawless at the moment, and it's happened to you, and I know on a couple of occasions just since of our relationship, minimum of 2 that I can recall.
It's been a dozen in the last year.
A dozen, actually. So you're keeping a lot to yourself. And I remember
it's kind of embarrassing.
I get it.
So that's why I don't say it all the time, but it happens quite a bit.
So we're in a tough situation now as believers where it's so important for us to walk as Christians and not be influenced by anything really. And especially in a case like yours, when something is so close to home, it would be so easy to create prejudices. It would be so easy to create things because the experiences have been so difficult for you. And you are an honest man. You'll look back and say, there was a day in which I made it hard on them.
Yes.
Yes.
And
now I've had it made hard on me and many, many times. And so, but the point is, we're dealing with situations that it's real important for us to be listening people and not be quick to make judgments. And I would say, I don't find that easy. Yes. If I go to see something on the news, I probably will be influenced pretty quickly, and I'll shape a view pretty fast. Yeah. And I did the same thing when I heard something respecting the riots that were going on. The more that I've heard, the more that I've talked, the more I'm conscious of things that I wasn't aware of before. And then there's information, obviously, I know nothing about that other people are talking about and whatnot. But the point is, all of it has to be, as a believer, put in one category and not the category that my mind and my life will be influenced by that. This is what's to influence my mind and my life.
Exactly.
And I've got to be careful not to allow myself to be, and I've said this a lot, as you know, Cain, through the coronavirus situation, about how I've been almost begging the church not to be overexposed to news and to spend way more time in God's Word and prayer than you do watching news.
Amen. Yep.
I don't think there's one Christian in 100 who spends more time in the Word and prayer than watching news.
Right.
And there's a good reason why we get to look not that different from the world, because what goes into a man's mind starts to influence your feelings. Before you know it, the Bible says, out of the heart are the issues of life. Yes. As a man thinketh, so is he.
Yes.
In his heart, it comes in there, and it becomes that way. So it's really important, isn't it, that we take care. And so, again, it's the purpose today. We're going to actually share some things from the Bible about as we go, but the purpose today isn't to say, to influence something. Brother Jerry sent me a couple of pictures tonight as he ran into something here down by the Raymond James Stadium, a group that's called the Blue Lives Matter. Of course, about the police. Right. And to say that Blue Lives Matter would be the understatement of the century. And to say that Black Lives Matter would be the understatement of the century.
Yes. Yes.
And to say that Asian lives matter would be the understatement of the century.
Yes.
And that Caucasian lives matter would be the understatement of the century. Every life matters.
Yes.
You know? And so as Christians, we've got to learn to walk in a right way.
Yes.
And you have been exposed to a lot, and you are a great example in my mind. It would be easy for you to be a rioter if you weren't a saved man.
Right.
Would it not?
I would have, yes.
To get involved in that. And so I hope people out there who have been influenced to feel a lot of rising up in hatred, you know, and stuff, and see you're a white man who's experienced what other people have experienced who are black.
Yes.
And so as a consequence, it's critical in my mind that we listen to people who give us perspective of experience, who have really touched it, who really know something about it. You know what I mean? Because most of us don't know anything about it.
Right.
There's some in this church who know about it. They've experienced different kinds of prejudice, different kinds of mistreatment from others, but most of us not that much.
Yeah.
So it's just too easy for us to form an opinion. But it happens, but we're right at a place in the Bible right now where Paul the Apostle was experiencing about as much injustice as one human being ever could.
Yes.
And how he responded to it's a great guideline for us, you know?
Amen.
But you're a great example. I want to just ask the church if you would give a round of applause for a man who knows what it is to be mistreated, and he'll still loves and cares about his fellow man, and including those who have mistreated him. Right. But go on, Cain, tell us more. When you went recently, why did you go up to Minneapolis? Why did you make your trip up there?
Well, the main reason was because I've gotten pulled over so many times. Part of it is the kind of vehicle I was driving. I bought a cheap, used Lexus at 270,000 miles on it. Mm-hmm. I put in way too much money into it.
I got 330. You just broke in.
Yeah. Mine's got the same engine, though.
Yeah, mine doesn't. That's true. Go ahead, Mike.
But in that, I think part of it was me. That was an issue. In fact, one of the police officers that had pulled me over recently said, "You just don't look like you should be driving a Lexus." So.
That's true.
Yeah. I car when I get in it because it's whatever. So because since the end of December, early January, if I should try to trade it in, get something different that would fly more under the radar kind of thing, so I hopefully don't get pulled over as much. And what? Yeah.
Somebody said a Corolla.
Yeah. So I was praying about a specific car. It's a bigger, like, SUV thing, and they're so common. I was praying about a specific one, and I remembered a friend of ours had one. So I texted him a few weeks ago and asked him what the reliability of it has been. And he said he's owned it since 2014, and there was only one issue that they had, and it was a minor issue. But in fact, they got a different vehicle for his wife, and they were thinking about selling this. Maybe God wants us to give it to you. And I said, well, let's pray. And we prayed about it for a little over a week. And he got a hold of me again and said, we're going to give it to you. We can't ship it down to you, so we'll fly you up, and you could drive it back. And that was a huge blessing. And in fact, our van just broke down. So this is a 7-seater, so it fits most of us. There's 8, with our family. It was a huge blessing to be able to go up there. But in the midst of all this, what happened to George Floyd happened. And that is my neighborhood. That is where I grew up. That precinct that I said was known to be brutal was the one that beat me up as a kid. I know that way. And I don't think it was a coincidence with the timing of any of this for me to go up while this was going on at all. So flew up and I got the vehicle, was hugely blessed with that, and met with my parents. We didn't argue, which is a good thing. Met with a couple other friends, and then I ended up in Minneapolis the next day.
Right there, Cain, for 1 second. There's just a particular specific I'd like to just to kind of give you a shout out about your way of life in this. you contacted me about this and wanted prayer about it as well, knowing what was going on up there and what has happened here recently. And I just think it's another way in which you're a very, very wonderful example, and Sherry, a very wonderful example, is that you guys are very prayerful about your decisions. And I've seen that since I've known you. You don't base it on a checklist of this or that, okay, like here's all the things I can have this, and it just seems like it's a given, or gosh, this is going on, so I shouldn't do it. You do like David did, and you put it out to the Lord and say, do I go to war or not? And I just think, gang, this is a good example. This is how life is meant to be lived as a follower of Jesus. And, just commend you for, and Sherry both, for people that are patient to ask God about things and to wait on Him and to talk to others and to pray about big decisions like that. But anyway, just, yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I think that's the way we should live, by faith. And so we don't often make decisions quickly, but whenever the Lord leads, we go. Yeah. So He led to get up there. And what I saw in Minneapolis was incredibly sad. Over 200 buildings have been burnt down. That's just in that area. There's other areas of Minneapolis that has happened. That was the post office that I would go to as a kid. This is 7 blocks away from my house that I grew up in. It's gone. You could do the next slide. That is directly across the street from the post office, where I didn't focus in on some of this stuff because it's all swear words. I didn't take a lot of pictures of that, or not, just because you don't need to see that. But you see right away what the intent. It's abolish the police. It was right away. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This here was a liquor store. This was a famous liquor store. It had been there for over 70 years. And that's where my parents would send me to go get stuff, or I would get stuff there when I was slightly older. But it is gone. That old sign you could see, that used to be the neon sign, that was original to the building for 70 plus years. Go ahead and go to the next one. This here was another side of the liquor store. You can see the sign a little bit more. They had a drive-in area where you could pick up stuff. Go ahead and go to the next one. This was a random doorway, but you see what it's written as. It says justice for George Floyd, but directly underneath it, don't burn, people live here. People were putting that on their buildings, spray painting that on their buildings because of the incredible rioting that was going on, that places were burning down that people lived in. So they thought, well, we'll just spray paint that, hopefully we won't get burnt down. That building was burnt. Go ahead and go to the next one. See, what is there is just rubble. That was a cafe, a tattoo shop, but also there was a famous cafe, a different one, that was featured on that show, Diners, Dives, and Drive-Ins, or whatever it's called, was right on the side of that building. That's gone. Go ahead, go to the next one. This building, completely shot on the inside. The brick on the outside helped it stand, but they're going to end up tearing it down. That was a multi-purpose building. On the side that's closest to you, the short side there, that was a clinic. And the long side, that was like a staffing and a learning center and things like that. Go ahead and go to the next. That was an auto zone. It's gone. That's just part of what's left there. Go ahead. This was a building that was right next to where that clinic and things were. This was a beautiful building. It's all stone from the Mississippi River that they used to put this together. And when Sherry and I lived there, they were fixing this building then, because it was an old one and they wanted to reface it. So it had office, but also some living space in it that is gone now. That was a pawn shop. It was. And it's completely gone. Go ahead and go to the next. This saddened me. This was the library. It was the East Lake Library. I grew up going to that library. I went there all the time. In fact, I met Stephen King there. Stephen King used to be my favorite author. I met him there. And I went there so often. And I didn't realize that this was the library. Because again, it's been a few years since we lived there. But as I was doing the notes for what pictures are for this, I looked at that and realized that that was the library. Go ahead. This is the backside of the library area, parking and things. This was next to the library. See, all the buildings are just destroyed. And at this point, all they were trying to do is tear down what was left because it's too much of a danger to people. That was a bus stop. This is right next to the Target that was looted the first night and then destroyed on the inside. That Target was connected to like a little strip mall where I met Santa every year as a kid. And that whole thing is destroyed. That was the AutoZone again, one side of it. This is the 3rd precinct. This is where the cops were based, and they were evacuated from the roof, and then they let it be. Since then, people have been arrested with what's it called? Bulletproof vests and shin guards and things like that that SWAT had there. But people, as soon as the cops were gone, they raided it. So they stole everything that was in there. This is the next few pictures are going to be like graffiti. But this one got to be kind of a famous picture because this is what was on CBS and CNN and all that kind of thing afterwards. This was a theater, but that's what they did on the outside. You see what this says? It says, "We are the no church in the wild." And I think this is significant because this is where people's mindset is. People believe that God has not protected them and not taken care of them. And because of how wild it is or how crazy it is, there isn't any church that's willing to do anything. I will say this. There was an older, I think it was a Lutheran church that's not that far away from all this devastation on Lake Street that was incredibly busy by giving food, water to people because the Target's been burned down, the Cub Foods was burned down, the different grocery stores, 16 pharmacies have closed just in that local area, including all of the corner stores. Everything's shot or shut down. Because of that, there's no place to get food. The bus system is stopped. So there's people there that can't go anywhere. So this church was handing out food and water at an amazing rate, which I thought was really a good way to start the ministry back, right? But that's what people's mindset is. Go ahead and go to the next one. That goes back to the abolish the police. And Black Lives Matter is a part of that, justice, love. Now, what this all kind of ties into is what I know. I know the prison system. I know how, unfortunately, how it's kind of set up. Different states have different amounts by race and that kind of thing. But one of the things that's brought up a lot is how much black people are incarcerated in comparison to white people. Now, on this picture here, it shows what the percentage of that race is in relation to the rest of the country. So you see how 33% of the prison system is black, but yet they only account for just a little over 12% of our population. But the white race, they account for 63% of the population, but they have 30% in the prison. You see the difference? Some states, you're 10 times more likely to be arrested if you're black. That's a dozen states that are like that.
5 states, it's like 4-1, 5-1. States are, every state is at least 2-1 that you'll be arrested or already are incarcerated. Every state, but some go farther than that. One of the things that I wanted to share with this is that people are incredibly hurt. And I know with my background of getting arrested and getting kind of harassed, I have incredible admiration and love for the police. I do. When somebody screws up, they need to be held accountable. This man who did that to George Floyd definitely needs to be held accountable. But when people bring up systemic racism or when they use those terms, a lot of people don't understand what that means. The word kind of goes to it's system-wide, okay? That's about it. You see what representation of, whether it's in Congress or judges or the amount of black people is lower than white people. That's due to population a lot of times. But because you're in some states 10 times more likely to get arrested if you're black, it doesn't necessarily mean it is all because of a bad community that you're growing up in, or it's gang related, or it's just kind of the norm. And how Minneapolis was, the norm was to look for, if it's a black person, then they're the one to arrest. And I'm not saying that just because, I am saying it because I know that. All of my black friends growing up, even if the ones that weren't doing anything wrong were arrested at one point or another. Every one of them. The corner house next to where I grew up was a house that was painted black, but it was the only black people that lived on that block, right? And routinely the cops would be there to harass them. Routinely. When Sherry and I had moved to the UP and other places, we had felt that finally society's kind of gotten past the racism thing. But a lot of that's because we're white and we didn't realize it. We didn't recognize it for ourselves. There is a man named Shai Lin. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Is Shay Lin? He's a Christian rapper. Because of what happened to George Floyd, I'm just going to read you a short thing that he wrote for the Gospel Coalition. He is of the Reformed background and things like that. But he's an excellent brother. And one of the white women in his church sent him, "How are you doing?" email. And this is what he wrote. I'm going to just say this to you. "Sister, I'm going to tell you how I'm doing. And as I tell you, please understand that I'm incapable of completing this message without weeping. There's a part of me that's saying, spare yourself the pain, Shai. It's not worth it. But I'm not choosing to listen to that part of me because I would be robbing you of an opportunity to bear one another's burdens and mourn with those who mourn. And I'm sure as a sister in Christ, you want to do just that. Sister, I'm heartbroken and devastated. I feel gutted. I haven't been able to focus on much at all since I saw the horrific video of George Floyd's murder. The image of that officer with hand in a pocket as he calmly and callously squeezed the life out of that man while he begged for his life is an image that will haunt me until the day I die. But it's not just the video of this one incident. For many black people, it's never about just one incident. Just as it wasn't just about the videos of Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Philandro Castile, Sandra Bland, Laquan McDonald, Walter Scott, Rodney King, etc., including the man who was just killed last night by police in Atlanta. That just happened last night too. The guy was running away. This is about how being a black man in America has shaped both the way I see myself and the way others have seen me my whole life. It's about being told to leave the sneaker store as a 12-year-old because I was taking too long to decide which sneakers I wanted to buy with my birthday money, and the white saleswoman assumed that I was in the store to steal something. It's about being handcuffed and thrown into the back of a police car while walking down the street during college, and then waiting for a white couple to come identify whether or not I was the one who'd committed a crime against them, knowing that if they said I was the one, I'd be immediately taken to jail, no questions asked. It's about walking down the street as a young man and beginning to notice that white people, women especially, would cross to the other side of the street to avoid walking past me, and me beginning to preemptively cross to the other side myself to save them the trouble of being afraid and to save me the humiliation of that silent transaction. It's about taking a road trip with my sons to visit Blair's family in Michigan, and my greatest fear being getting pulled over for no reason other than driving while black, told to get out of the car, cuffed, and sat down on the side of the road, utterly emasculated and humiliated while my young boys looked out the window, terrified, which is exactly what happened to a good friend of mine when he took his family on a road trip. It's about the exhaustion of constantly feeling I have to assert my humanity in front of some white people I'm meeting for the first time to let them know, hey, I'm not a threat. You don't need to be afraid. If you got to know me, I'm sure we have things in common. It's about me sometimes asking my wife to do things in certain customer service situations, since I know she'll likely get treated better than I will. I deal with that myself. My wife will get treated well, and oftentimes I don't. It's about borrowing a baby swing from a white friend in our mostly white suburb of DC, and her telling me, sure, you can come borrow it. I have to step out, but I'll leave it on the porch for you. Just go grab it. And then feeling heart palpitations as my car approached her home, debating whether or not to get the swing, and being terrified as I walked up the steps that someone would think I was stealing it and call the cops on me. It's about intentionally making sure that car seats are in the car, even if the kids aren't, so that when, not if it happens all the time, I'm stopped by the police, they will perhaps notice the car seats and also the wedding band on one of my visible hands on the wheel, which I've been taught to keep there and not move it until he tells me to, and even then, in an exaggeratedly slow manner, and will perhaps think to himself, this man's married with a family and small kids like me. Maybe he wants to get home safely to his family just like I do. It's about having to explain to my 4-year-old son at his mostly white Christian school that the kids who laughed at him for having brown skin were wrong, that God made him in his image and that his skin is beautiful, after he told me, Daddy, I don't want brown skin, I want white skin. It's about having what feels like genuine fellowship with my white brothers and sisters who share the same Reformed theology until I mention racism, injustice, or police brutality, at which point I'm looked at skeptically as if I embrace a social gospel or am some kind of liberal or social justice warrior. And it's about sometimes feeling like some of my white friends aren't that particularly interested in truly knowing me, at least not in any meaningful way that would actually challenge their preconceptions. Rather, it feels like they use me to feel better about themselves because I check off the black friend box. Much more could be mentioned. These were the first things that came to mind. So when I watch a video like George Floyd's, it represents for me the fresh reopening of a deep wound and the reliving of layers of trauma that get exponentially compounded each time a well-meaning white friend says, all lives matter. Of course they do. But in this country, black lives have been treated like they don't matter for centuries and present inequalities in criminal justice, income, housing, healthcare, education, etc. It shows that all lives don't actually matter like they should. So that was his answer to his wife, to his friend. But this is what he says. For me, life as usual means recognizing some people perceive me as a threat based solely on the color of my skin. For me, life as usual means preparing my sons for the coming time when they're no longer perceived as cute little boys, but teenage thugs. Long after George Floyd disappears from the headlines, there'll still be a black man in America. And you know what? I thank God for that. He knew exactly what he was doing when he made me the way he did. It says, I know that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I wouldn't want to be anything other than what I am, a follower of Jesus Christ who has been saved by grace and redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. And I share that because a lot of the black people that I do minister to have the same kind of story. There's a man on death row who was convicted. Jury gave a unanimous decision for death row because they said he killed 2 people, but the problem is he was actually already in jail when the murder happened. But he was convicted and unanimously given death. He knows he'll get out, but he doesn't know if he'll get out and go right to heaven. I bring up all this, I don't want to be uncomfortable or bring up hard things necessarily, but this is something that isn't dealt with and there hasn't been a lot said on the Christian side of things. And we need to pray and share the love that God has given us. Remember what Jesus said when the scribe came to him and asked him, what are the most important law? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what we need to do. And we need to be more out there with that, I think.
Guys, like I said, Cain and I did not talk in advance about what would share. I just know him and the kind of man that he is and how he walks with the Lord, and fully expected that we would get some good wisdom as we try to think about, guys, I don't know if I'm on or off testing. So I don't know whether or not that, you've had a chance to give the kind of reflection that, Cain has obviously given to these things. And again, some of the reasons why a person may put so much attention, just like the wonderful reading that he read, the letter written by Shylin, I think I pronounce it. So a lot of thought went into that. A lot of heart went into that. But sometimes when you're the one who experiences things, then that causes you to put more reflection in there. And a lot of us may not have given much reflection. We may just have been only reacting to the images that come before us. And that's where it's challenging, isn't it? It's really challenging. Certain images come before you, and then you get shaped by it. And I just want to caution us all to be very careful to not let any news source shape you. Be careful about that. Because, God wants to guide our lives. He wants us to walk in a way that's very different. And we have to be taught it again and again and again. Our nature as men, is extremely inclined toward, a quick reaction, toward shaping something quickly and being prideful and I've got it and I'm right and that's it. But probably not. Probably there's a great need for us to spend a good amount of time before our Father and less amount of time with the exposure to the world's things and let Him help shape our thoughts and mind so that it's kind of like a WWJD thing, like what would He do? How would He behave? Did they have every kind of racism in the first century? Oh gosh, yeah, extremely so. I mean, I had the joy the other day of getting to talk to one of our chaplains in Chaplain Corps, Brother Ronald George, and from over in St. Petersburg. His work that he had been doing with the Salvation Army also had to come to an end as a result of what had happened, and we're going to bring Michael up and talk more about those types of things in just a moment. But his work came to an end with that. Now he, praise the Lord, I just got to talk to him, and he is employed now, and God's opened up a door, and just fantastic. But I, in talking to him, one of the things, the takeaways I got, Cain, was this, that I tried to think about the idea that what if you were Paul and you're a part of a group that's very prejudiced against all Gentiles, very prejudiced against them, and you're called to go and preach to them. And so all your people that you've grown up with, all that you've gone to church with, as it were, have a certain mindset about everybody else who's not one of us. And you're called to go to them. But you've got a heart for your own people because they're your own people and they're after the flesh, you're related in this regard in a way that's very distinct. And so with that, he has this burden to go to his own people, but they know him as a guy who goes to the people they're prejudiced against. That's a very big challenge. And I thought about my friend Ronald George, and as we were talking, I thought, how hard is it right now when his people after the flesh are feeling a certain way, and yet he's a follower of Christ and wants so badly to get message of truth to them? How hard is that? How difficult? Because are you a turncoat? Are you somebody who's going the other direction? This is what people are dealing with right now. And it's really, really important that we allow ourselves to draw close to our Christ and hear His heart. And I, just as I can tell you obviously have, and I had no question that you would have. But thank you for perspective. Thank you for taking the time to do what you did. to look at it carefully and to be prayerful about it.
I had 1,700 miles to pray, too. I had 1,700 miles to pray on the way back. I had lots of time to pray, and God showed me a lot in this time. And that's why I said I'm not prejudiced towards police or to black or white or whatever, green. It doesn't matter. It matters that Christ died for me and he died for you, period. And I want you to know who Christ is. It doesn't matter about anything else.
Amen. Guys, give Cain a round of applause, and thank you for your time, Cain. Bless you, man.
Love you, God bless you. Love you.
So I want to welcome another good friend, Michael Batenburg, who, again, he is with Chaplain Corps, but long before he was with Chaplain Corps, he started a ministry called Back to Basics Outdoor Ministries. Really interesting, and we're going to get to talk to him and see some perspective. Michael, come on up and give him a round of applause as Michael Batenburg comes to talk with us today. I see you brought a friend, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you on.
Testing. There we go. Sit.
Go ahead, Michael. Test your mic. I think you're good.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good.
Great.
Good.
Relax, Cece.
Well, Michael, again, welcome. Glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Michael, through the Chaplain Corps, like Cain, has been involved in the prison ministry. Cain for years and years, and Michael in a newer way. And so he has been reaching out to the inmates at the jail in Pinellas County, which is considerably larger than our jail in Pasco County. I think the population is probably close to double.
Sure.
You have 3,000 or more inmates there. And he brought me over, and Mark. Cain, did you get to make that trip? I can't remember, but I know Mark and I, and maybe Chaplain Dennis, got to go over together with you and meet with you, and talk to one of the leaders over there, the chaplains over there, and that was a pleasure. And we look forward to seeing what God's going to do over there again once things open up again. But Michael, tell us a little bit about Back to Basics. First of all, let me take one quick step. You were born where?
I was born in Ohio, but was born to a very ambitious father who was focused on business. And really, it's funny when I was sitting listening to Cain, and I always love to listen to Cain. He has such great insight and experiences. But I said, following Cain is going to be really difficult. Why did I have to go second? And now I know, because people ask me about the ministry and why I wanted to start the ministry. And I always say that, well, I lived a life that I was promoted to live from my father's ideology, which was, and excuse my choice of language, his actually wasn't exactly this way. He said, son, life is a poop sandwich and you must take a bite every day. And the more bread you have, the less poop you have to eat. And I believe that. And so, and I tell people why I chose to start the ministry was because that I wanted to live a life of significance and not what society considered to be success. So after 45 years, I decided to leave the secular world of business and personal gain and so forth and give my life to Christ. But really why I did it was what Cain was alluding to, which is something that I didn't have, which was spiritual leadership in my family household. Based on Christianity, and someone that was able to walk alongside me and be able to encourage me and to lift me up and to hold me accountable with the real true values of life and what's most important, and not being monetary and financial success. So that's really why I started the ministry, and why I designed the ministry to focus on what I feel is lacking out there. It's so funny, speaking to Pastor Mike, you've now connected with the organization that I cut my teeth on and did the proof of concepts for Back to Basics, which your kids are going to be going up to a great kids camp, Camp Anderson up in Old Town. Mr. Bloodworth took me alongside of him and gave me an opportunity to see what running a Christian kids camp that sees 500 kids a week for 10 weeks of summer, which is a pretty daunting experience, looks like. And it gave me the opportunity to see the things that I felt worked and see the things that I thought were lacking. And one of the things that I really thought was lacking was boy, when these kids go home, who's there to keep them accountable? Who's there to lift them up? Who's there to encourage them? Are they going back to a spiritual leader in their family? And if they're not, gosh, how do I help to make that change? And so that's where Back to Basics came into play. Not that we don't allow kids, we welcome kids, but we don't welcome kids alone. They have to be with a spiritual leader or a representation of that, so that when they go home, that there is somebody there to come alongside of them and to take what they've learned and to continue it, so that it's not just memories and pictures, but it's a plan to walk toward an ultimate goal of discipleship.
So it looks, I'm sure, Michael, that there's any number of ways that you can connect in Back to Basics. And maybe before I go on with my questions, because I think this is the video that's the introduction to the ministry in some sense. Is that correct, or is this the one that...
Yeah, and really we don't even need to see that. I mean, I've kind of given you the overview of what we do. Again, right now we've been blessed with relationships and access to land and to activities in 11 states in Costa Rica. We primarily focus on adults, men's groups, women's groups, couples groups, and families. And the whole idea is to design a custom experience that doesn't have 500 guests a week, but more intimate. We love small groups. 12 obviously comes to mind for biblical reasons and for a number of other great reasons, to have an opportunity to have something that's intimate and special and personalized. We have done larger groups up to 65. We do a couple of fishing trips with men, women, and co-eds that has a larger group. But the majority of adventures that we do are small. We love 6, 12, 15, under 20, because we really want to give an opportunity for each individual to not only take home something that is unique and special that was for them, but also give them that special attention. So that, we just finished a great man's camp that was just amazing. It had pastors, it had folks from the Navigators in attendance, it had pilots and business owners and so forth. And the greatest thing that was a result of that is one of the guests said, I felt like this was designed for me specifically, and I hope everybody else got something out of it, because it felt like it was for me. And I wept. Because that's the type of impact that we want to put on people, is to allow them when they leave to take something that really touched them and gives them the opportunity to implement that, to hopefully pass that along to the individuals that they're influencing, so that when situations arise like these terrible ones that have recently arisen, that there's a foundation in there that says, this is wrong. This is not the way that we need to be, and we need, as Cain had mentioned, and it's my favorite verse. I have it tattooed on my wrist to just remind me, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's as easy as it is, and if we just focus on that, then we can fulfill that great commission. So,
Michael, I want to just ask you now a couple of specific questions about your ministry. And so now, when a group, as you mentioned, the various sizes, has an interest in doing some sort of an outdoor adventure, it's either from, because I've seen your website and looked at it very carefully, of course I've interacted with you on it, but it's either from a list of ideas that have been done before, right?
Right.
Where somebody can just get their mind prompted and say, here's something, here's something, here's something, and they are tremendously fun looking, But you also do customized things as well, so that somebody who already is an outdoors person and has some thought on the subject could come and you would work with them on it and help them to pull that off. And then also, Michael, isn't it true? Now, so on the spiritual component of it, do you work directly? In other words, is that all on the onus of the group that wants to go, that they think that all through and they work on that and they do it in some cases? Or in other cases, do you guys bring people and let them relax a little bit and you actually provide the spiritual support and help? Which way?
Answer to the question is yes.
Yes.
So it is customized based on the group. If an individual has programming that they want to make sure gets executed during the adventure, then they're more than welcome to bring their resources and bring individuals to go ahead and do that. If they need programming, we obviously provide programming, and we're happy to fill that role for them. But at the end of the day, what we really want to do is we want to eliminate all of the overhead and all of the taxing of logistics and accommodations and food and activities and all of that time-consuming things that take away from the opportunity from you to actually be engaged with your fellow guests that are there. We don't want to take away from that opportunity for you to build fellowship and to be able to have those intimate experiences and be able to truly focus that time that you're away on building yourself and your heart and those relationships. So we just take that overhead and we eliminate it. We're, as I affectionately say, we're God's travel agent.
God's travel agent. That's good.
But as far as the trips are concerned, I mean, activities, in my opinion, are the hook, right? Especially for people that aren't mature in their walk. You know, we love, I call it clueless, curious, committed, convicted, or a disciple. And those individuals at the lower end of it, being clueless and curious, a lot of times these activities will hook them, you know, whitewater rafting, hunting, fishing, camping, whatever. It inspires them and they can connect with that, and it gives them an opportunity to say, hey, I'll go and check that out. But really what it's about is the experience that takes place, not necessarily the activities. So the activities are there as an inspiration and something to do and something to force you to come alongside of your neighbor, to be able to do things together as a group, because as the body of Christ, we need each other. We were all given individual gifts and individual talents, and individually they're great, but they don't complete it. It's not a whole until we're working together, and that's why all of our programs are designed so that we need to have each other to be able to fit that ultimate goal. So, you know, to answer your question, we really prefer to do customized stuff. We really prefer to sit down with an individual that says, hey, I've got this family or I've got this group, and this is what we want to do and this is what we want to accomplish, and these are the activities that we'd like to experience. Can you do something special for me? But we also have great sign-up add-on adventures. Like we're going to have an epic 4th of July paddle out of St. Pete, where we're actually going to paddle underneath the fireworks and be able to experience that wonderful show and the camaraderie of all the...
And Michael, something like that people can plug right into. That's
just
not a closed group. That's an open opportunity.
Come and sign up. And we probably do a paddle at least once a month. We do a lot of unique paddles, moonlight paddles and things. And, when I know that we're doing the right thing when what we're doing is not something that you can actually go and do without his intervention.
Right.
When we were given access to preserves that are closed and be able to have campfires that you can't have fires, and we're getting approvals to do these things, and I know that the reason that I'm being given those approvals is because he's blessing it, and he says, you're on the right track. You need these resources, and I'm going to give them to you. And that's, when people ask, how can I help? How can I be involved? I say, listen, writing a check is easy. And don't get me wrong, we love people that support us financially, but having access to resources, having access to land, participating as a volunteer, spreading the word and letting people know that we have these great adventures available, attending our fundraiser banquets. I mean, there's just all kinds of ways outside of just financially supporting our organization, again, which we greatly appreciate. But as it says in the book, time, talents, and treasures. And sometimes the time and the talent is 1,000 times more valuable than the treasure. Yeah. So we'd love for you to come alongside us as a guest, as a volunteer, as an advocate, as somebody that just wants to participate however you feel led, and come alongside of us and enjoy all that God has given us. I mean, I've grown closer to Christ by being out in the wilderness, and as my mentor always says, when I asked him, I have a hard time wondering when God is going to speak to me, and he said, are you listening? And I said, well, sometimes I'm not, because as you can see, I like to talk. But being out into the wilderness and being intentional and having that opportunity to listen and to be still and hear his voice is a great way to leverage the gifts that he's given us and to truly hear his voice and grow.
It's a part of the spiritual instruction to us in the Bible that as we follow in the Lord is that he got away to quiet places.
Amen.
And so, it's important for us to remember that. So, you're in Minneapolis like Cain just showed us and how he grew up. That may take a little bit more doing to be able to get a little still and quiet from time to time, but you can always make your war room in your home and close the door just like the movie, right?
Amen.
And a place that you can get away and pray like Jesus said. But the point is, there is something special about that, and the idea of the quiet surroundings is something that we see it shown in the Bible, we see it in the Old Testament, we see it in the New Testament. It does make a difference. And not everybody is quote-unquote an outdoor person. In fact, not many probably by comparison may be, but not everybody has to go on this radical whitewater rafting trip in which it's just like, hell on for dear life. Because I'm thinking, by the way, that's probably a really good way to do evangelism. Take somebody along, put them on the radical, no, I'm just joking. It probably work. No, but all kidding aside, Michael, it's really cool what you do. It's such a unique thing, and I'd love to help you get the word out. I've been talking about that. I know you'll be speaking soon over at the Wesley Chapel Zephyr Hills Ministerial Association. We're excited about that. And but others of you guys that are here that enjoy the outdoors and can think about things, whether it's family related or a group that you're engaged in, something here at Calvary Chapel or some other group, you might want to connect with them about the ideas that are possible for having a really neat outing, a really neat retreat. Yeah. And I know, I for sure, in our men's ministry at Calvary Chapel, we're going to figure out something to connect with you on that because I think the potential is so cool. Yeah, and we'd love to do it. But Michael, it's great having you. And Michael, one last thing. We were focusing more on the George Floyd thing, of course, with Cain Kellerman. And I said I wanted to mention, of course, the coronavirus thing and its relationship to private nonprofits, to parachurch ministries like your own. And so we're just about out of time, but I would like to ask you this. Things were going probably pretty well prior to that, and then all of a sudden this thing came, and you're probably in a rebuilding thing, as some other things are right now. Is there any, just briefly, that you could say, do you see on the horizon that it's just really a matter now to keep this thing moving, to start getting some trips organized, that would be a huge thing for the time? That would be a game changer? Or?
Absolutely. And, we had a very hard time when everything came to a halt. Our fundraisers came to a halt. Our adventures slowed down drastically, except for families, that could do things together and not fear the exposure to others. And I know that, just as it says in the book, God takes everything and it uses them for good. And what outcome has come from this is that people now, because of this fact they spent so much time cooped up and not engaging with others, are ready to go out and ready to engage and ready to take opportunities to come alongside of each other. And I love the fact that, God leveled the playing field globally for the first time in my life, where it didn't matter what you did, where you came from, how much money you made. We were all affected in one way or another, very similarly because of this. And what it did is it gave us the opportunity to say, what's most important? It's not that football game. It's not that concert. It's not all of these things that we've created idols over. It's relationships. It's relationships with Him, and it's relationships with each other. And the only way to do that is to spend time together. And we have the platform to provide that time. So, I'm looking at this as a wonderful, wonderful blessing. And just need to get the word out now that if you're looking to do something like that, we've got a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for you to do so. And if we have the chance to show a video, we have videos of just about every one of our trips that we do.
Well, what do we do with that, Michael? Let's just watch that short video so people can see a quick idea of what's going on.
Yeah, if you'd like to see videos of actual trips that we've done, we have a slew of them available. And if you'd like to get any additional information, you can always go to the website.
Is it
call me personally.
backtobasics.com or .org?
Back, B-A-C-K, the number 2, basics, O-M, outdoorministry.com.
Back to basics with the number 2,
OM.com. Yes.
.com. Okay, we got it.
Bless
Well, Michael, it was a joy to have you with us today,
Thank
brother.
you.
And I think what you have is a very neat, unique ministry.
you.
And we're going to be praying with you. That's going to just blow up here now as people are getting back and being active again. And so much good, I can tell, can be done by this approach to things. And it's neat that the Lord laid in your heart to do it. So go for it, man. We're excited.
Thank you. That's the number one way that you can support us. Just pray for us. Absolutely. That would be greatly appreciated.
Well, we'll do it. God bless you, Brother Michael.
Thank you.
Bless you.